Um, Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar on driving API returns by putting developers first. I'm Mark Boyd from Platformable, and I'm here with Adeel Ali, the co-founder of APIMatic and PhD in web APIs.
Hi,
Hey,
Mark.
Adeel.
How are you doing?
Yeah, great. Good to be sharing this time with you.
Yeah,
So
likewise.
our webinar today is going to be on driving API returns by putting developers first. I'll share my screen now and start going through a couple of introductory slides, and then Adeel will walk us through talking about developer experience and how that's so important for building value from your API program. So just quickly about me, my background's in public health and urban planning, where I was doing a lot of data systems design and evaluation, and now I've brought that sort of knowledge to working in the API sector, where I've worked with banks and some public transport, mobility, and some non-profits and governments. I'm an expert consultant to the European Commission, World Bank, and some tech companies, and I'm the founder of Platformable, where we support businesses and governments to sort of build the platforms where all the participants can co-create their own value. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means in an open banking context a bit later on. First of all, I'll just set the scene on the global context. This comes from the Platformable series of quarterly trends reports on open banking. What we found is that around the world, there is a lot of open banking regulatory environments that are being introduced. So in a lot of places, governments are saying that banks have traditionally held on to too much of the market, and that now we need to open up and expose banking functionality so that a range of other players like FinTech, enterprises, a whole range of businesses are able to then offer financial services to customers. As a result, you can see here that banks are then opening up their platforms by using APIs, and around the world you can see both a growth in the number of banking platforms that are being offered, and then each of those banks has a number of API products. So an API product might be something like a payments functionality or viewing the account's information records, and then the whole you can see a whole series there. So there's a large number of API products that are being developed around the world. And then alongside that, then in order for banks to be able to work with third parties like FinTech, then they need to be offering a developer experience. And at Platformable, we had a look at just 3 measures of developer experience. We looked at the number of developer portals that banks were offering, where banks had been mentioning the use cases of the APIs that they offered, and then those that had pricing pages that would sort of indicate the monetization of the APIs, or, like if you were going to use these APIs in a commercial way, then you need to know what it's going to cost you on average in a month to be using those APIs. So it's important to have those pricing pages. But this was a very cursory look at developer experience. And one of the things that I always love about our chats, Adeel, is that you've got a much deeper insight into what developer experience means and how organizations can go about building developer experience that really drives new business. So I'll hand over now to Adeel, and you'll walk us through understanding APIs as products and the value of investing in developer experience.
Thank you, Mark. That's a great introduction. So let me share my screen. Please let me know when you start seeing it. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Okay. So can you see my screen now, Mark?
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Thank you again for a great introduction. So as you mentioned, Mark, we are seeing a plethora of open banking and fintech APIs. We are seeing beautiful developer portals. We are seeing good standards being followed like PSD2. But right now, the APIs are currently being evolved as like like they're in initial phases. The core focus right now is on designing and development and following their standards. After some time, the questions will come up like if I have released a beautiful API portal, then the first question is how many developers are actually using it? How many integrations are being built on that API? So these are the questions which will define if we are getting appropriate return on our API investment. So the question is, we need to be thinking right now, what will drive in future the real return on our API investment? So I'm going to take you through developers first approach, which is currently being used by the top APIs in the world who have massive developer attraction. So uh, if you remember, like internet banking, it's there since 90s. I guess in 1994, the first bank became like accessible via internet. So people used to access via their browsers. Then come the mobile era, and almost same functionality but available via mobile applications. So that was the past. What happens right now, like at that time, people can only check their bank accounts or do some basic transaction. That's it. That was the whole internet banking or mobile banking. But with the advent of like APIs and the whole industry, which we call FinTech industry, now people can do much more with their bank accounts. For example, I have like our company accounts are in 3 countries. So what we can do, I can simply aggregate all of them in a single and see like reports in a single currency by just choosing a simple app. Similarly, if I want to run my budgets, do some financing, I don't have to, just like go manually collect that report and do things by myself. I can give consent to a fintech company or fintech application who can access my bank account on my behalf and provide me the reports. So this fintech industry has just like opened up a huge amount of opportunities. But what's driving all of it? Of course, APIs are the main driver. And not only APIs are opening up the banking functionalities, but they are also acting as, for example, making these fintech platforms, which are like available via APIs to other finance and business applications. So there are companies who are acting as platforms, and other applications are using their functionality via API. So before APIs, what used to happen, like there were some tightly coupled integration services, but since APIs become the only interface to access the banks and the platforms, they are now being treated as products, and they follow the traditional product lifecycle, such as when you create a product, you maintain or control it, and then you consume it. So if you closely look at the creation part, so you design your API, you publish it, you develop it, you like select technology, you go on CI/CD, life like size cycles, and when it comes to control part, you select the best API management tool out there. But keep in mind, all of those phases are your investment in the API program. You are basically investing to make your API available out there. And once it's out there in the hands of developers outside the walls of your enterprises, then comes the consumption part, which defines the return on investment of your API. And the better return you get, the better, of course, that's the outcome. But how can you improve that return? By connecting more and more developer communities to your APIs. The more integrations you have, the more developers you have, the more the value they can get from your API. So if we want to focus on return, we need to be focusing on the audience of our APIs, and who are none other than developers. So since it's established that developers are the audience of our API products, so if we talk about product user experience, I found a superb book on product user experience that says "Don't make me think." for a great product user experience, which is a common sense approach to web and mobile usability. So if a good product user experiences don't make me think, then a great API user experiences don't make me code, and make everything available to consume your API in a language which I understand well. I understand well. So uh, provide everything that makes a developer's life easier by helping them. Don't let them code anything extra, and that's exactly what the top APIs are doing. If we look at a list of some APIs, so that's a little survey which I did, I guess, a couple of years back. You can see from Twilio to Stripe, Algolia is there, Dropbox, Google APIs. And I want you to focus over here, like official SDKs, the languages you can see by yourself, and not only SDKs, but tutorials, code samples, sample request and response. So you can see a synergy among the developer experience offerings among all these APIs, which have massive developer traction. And if I recall, I don't see a single API, a single serious API, which provides only one of these, like HTTP reference, and they don't help developers in their language. So how these different components are like become part of the journey of a developer. So let me take you through the developer experience journey, and with a definition and the steps which are part of this journey. So developer experience journey is simply this little cute pirate is your developer who wants to reach to the first hello world, and the help you can provide to him or her in reaching here, that's called your developer experience. So there are many definitions of developer experience, but what we call a great developer experience is if you let this developer reach to the hello world in least number of steps, then you are fine. So you will be able to achieve a great developer experience. Now, how you can do it and how companies are doing it is the following. Typically, any API company provides an API reference. So a developer is given an API reference, and then he or she is free to choose like any way. But the goal is always to reach to the first hello world, because once you have reached this to first hello world, then the times come up, then you can start building your business logic or integration. You have established a working, or you can say, uh, a, 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 a working connection with the API. You have seen it's working. You have figured out what are the errors with your first call, and then you can start building your applications. But from here to here, it's not a straightforward journey. What are the steps involved? For example, after looking the API reference, a developer will have to figure out what is the configuration of to call this API, then create call arguments. Then comes a part of authentication, which could be way more complicated if a custom auth is used and if a little help is available to the developer. Then comes a part of API interaction. There are checks and validations, the input encoding, serializing the body, building HTTP request, then making the call. When the return comes, deserializing it, decoding to output, and then handling errors. After all those steps, we are able to reach to the first hello words. So all of these steps, if we want to group them into like common artifacts, what we can see, sample application code over here, authentication code over there, and API interaction code. We can combine both request and response in one entity. So as a whole, you are seeing four things which are helping developers here. Number one, API reference. Number two, sample app code. Number third, authentication code. And number four, API interaction code. And that's exactly what you saw the top APIs are doing by providing all of these to the developers. And if you are providing them in a right order, what you will be getting a straight path from your API reference to the first hello world with the help of dynamic code sample, assisted authentication, and SDKs or client libraries. So that's the journey of a developer towards the first API call. And now I'm going to take you through three models of developer experience, which are currently being adopted by companies. And we'll be focusing on investment versus return on each of the following models. The first one is low investment and low return. And this is the most common one, I would say, because when you are starting your API program, typically you focus on just designing and developing APIs, and you publish them, and you let the consumers design and develop applications on those APIs. But they will have to figure out about the journey, all the steps you just saw in the past slides. So how they figure it out, it's all up to them. Why I am calling it low return? Because without any help, the cost of integration becomes much higher. The time to market becomes much higher. The integrations are slow and the return is low. The second model, which is adopted by the top API, which I showed earlier on, is this: high investment, high return. And the steps which I mentioned a couple of slides earlier, API reference doc, sample application code, authentication code, and API interaction code, and all the you can say major programming languages, they care to provide those. Of course, it increases their development cost, but it massively reduces the integration cost for the consumers. And if you are able to provide it in multiple languages, you are actually engaging the developer communities of those languages. And your integration in all those languages becomes much more frequent. So it's high investment, but the return is high as well. There is a third model, which becomes the beginner model if you want to go with your API program. And this is using all of these, like not cutting on these, but providing these by automatic code generation. So if you automatically providing all of these code, you can reduce your development cost while, of course, keeping the integration cost low. And by doing so, you are not only saving your development cost, but you're also making it quick. You're saving your time to market. You're saving your maintenance cost because all you have to worry about is a single API description. Just feed it to any automatic code generator like APIMatic, and then you can get all of those in your API portal, put them on your API portal, publish SDKs on GitHub, or create uh, executable binaries. It's up to you. But the thing is this: model number three, low investment, high return. And I'm going to show you an example before going towards conclusions. The example is from Earthport, which is recently being acquired by Visa. So Earthport is a fintech company, and I have their portal with me right here. So Earthport API, if you go their docs.earthport.com, they are a customer of APIMatic. And if I, for example, select Java language, if I'm a Java developer, I have my integration set up, I have my ID as an Eclipse. So I am seeing how I can build, how I can test, and how I can start with this API if I download this SDK. So let me quickly jump down to uh, an endpoint. Imagine I am a fintech user and I'm creating a new user over here programmatically. And the parameters, if I see to create this user is a body parameter. Now, imagine I'm a developer and I need to see what the body am I going to send with this API request. So this says users create or validate request. Okay. If I go in, let me open in a new tab. So it contains four elements. This one is mandatory. If I go in pair identity, it contains further four. If I go in individual identity, you can see further elements over here. If I click on address, you can see further. So imagine a developer going through all this documentation, reading what address line 3 is, what kind of city is required, if I am providing country that it needs to support valid ISO blah 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 character country code. It's super difficult for a developer to just keep everything in mind. And that's why we see a big, chunk of PDF documents in the past going on, and still HTTP documents going on with the APIs. So the real, vision is to help developers in their journey, and what you can help them by not letting him or her keep, in mind, but help by doing it. For example, go to Explorer over here. You can see everything which we saw in the parameters, but now this. This account currency is a mandatory one. User ID is not a mandatory one. We can close it off. And if I come down, if I see individual identity, it's an optional one, but it is a part of peer identity. If I come down, if I see family name over there, given name. So I have examples filled in. So all the examples are there, but developers can write their own input. As I'm typing over here, you can see the code is being populated on the right. So come down to address. Again, there's an optional field. If I take it off, you can see the code is going off. And the validation, for example, in country, if I, instead of Great Britain, if I write great, so it says should not be longer than 2 characters. So it's correcting me as I'm typing. If I come down, and if I add birth information, of course, this is optional. But if I select it, then I have to provide all of these fields. So this is something which a developer is not reading and coming back and trying by in the code. He or she is just doing right in front of him or her. And come down, IDs is an important part for any fintech or any bank. So if you want to add an ID, you can add it. You can give an ID type, for example, if it is SSN, I can add one more ID, maybe like passport, and I can basically swap these to go I can move these, and I can just go on with building my code. So as you can see, once I am done, I can see the error codes and all the usual stuff. But the most important thing, the gold, is on the right. Everything I built here is in the language in front of me, which I am more comfortable in, because developers they are more comfortable when they see anything written in code instead of words. So that's the code snippet. But what if I am doing it for the first time and I want to see it the first as a first hello world complete program? I can click simply over here and click show complete file. Now you can see from imports, dependencies, everything, the complete class is there. You can see the main class, and you can provide your OAuth access token over here, and you can choose your sandbox or production environment and simply click try it out. When you try it out, it will give you the response, and you take the response and they copy this code to your favorite IDE, and your first hello world is there. You can go there, you can see the model, everything you can see, you can read. But the best part was to help developers build their own code samples while they are learning. So you are helping them learning through experience. So if I click on SDK, let me show you. Yeah, so Earthport Java API, I'm opening it up. So if you go there, the controllers, you can see the user controller, which I just saw over there. It's opened up over here. So this file is, yeah. So what it contains, all the endpoints which are grouped under the user, like user and all the user endpoints are gathered over here. Now traverse down and see the amount of code which is automatically generated, which your developer would have to create, because you have to create the models, you have to take care of all the error codes, you have to take care of serialization, you have to take care of the output coming from the API and putting on the appropriate models, and everything is done automatically for you. So that's kind of developer experience which top APIs are providing, and any fintech company or open banking API should be focusing on them to get better return on investment. So not going in further details, you can read about them at apimatic.io, the SDKs and everything about that. I am going back to my conclusion. And the conclusion over here is the following. Number one is for the best return on investment on your API, know your audience, speak their language. If you are not speaking, for example, one language, just if you're not providing your API support in Python, just remove all these yellow people from here. So you have to think which API community you can afford to miss by not speaking that language. And how powerful is the concept of speaking the language? That's my second conclusion. I quote Nelson Mandela always in my presentations. And the beautiful quotation is that if you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head. But if you talk to him in his language, that goes to his heart. Developers are no different. If you want to improve your ROI, then it's directly proportional to the developer experience you're providing. So that's all from my side. I am handing over back to you, Mark, to take us through like how we can realize these values which we have just learned over here.
Wow, that was amazing. Thanks, Adeel. I really love the where you talk about the idea that we measure developer experience because the whole idea is about trying to get the idea of you want to reduce the steps and you want to reduce the time for the developers. Um, and I think that that's and the reason why we want to reduce the steps and we want to reduce the time for developers is because the developers are working for businesses that are building products with our APIs. So for banks, the banks have the APIs that they're releasing. The idea is that FinTech are then using those APIs to build new FinTech products, like you've demonstrated. So, for example, in your business, you need to have financial accounting software that connects directly to your bank APIs. You gave the example for, and so that what banks need to do is be able to get a return on their investment of their APIs faster so if that developer time is reduced, then those fintech products go to market faster. Like you were saying, that this helps reduce the time to market. And then from the time to market, then those fintech products can build up the customer base. The more they build up a customer base, the more API calls they're making. And then through the API calls or other sort of monetization methods, then the bank APIs are actually bringing in new revenue, and therefore that's being proven for the business that there's the value.
Amazing summary, Mark. Great. Thank you very much.
So what I want to then talk about for the rest of this webinar is then how do we go about measuring that value? You've invested in the developer experience in order to get the sort of goals that Adeel's talked about, but now we want to actually show that that's creating a return on investment for the bank. In particular. So, and the reason why we want to do this is because often with the API teams within banks, they're given a small amount of budget and they're expected to show the results fairly quickly. But as you know, listeners who are working within banks, there's a lot riding on your success. Like there's a lot of expectation. As Adeel was showing, there's a movement from first internet banking to mobile banking and now to open banking. That mindset is only just being started within banks. So there's a reliance on you to demonstrate the value of that whole platform mindset shift as well. So, and you've got a limited time to do that, really. Like there's a push on you to start showing the returns from what you're doing with your APIs quickly. In the start, I showed you that there was a regulatory push, but that's for a very basic set of APIs. And banks, as they're opening up those APIs, they're saying, yep, we're doing this for regulatory purposes. But those who are doing more than just the low investment, low return models that are wanting to see some returns for that. So when we do measurement, what we're showing is that when we invest in developer experience, we show the whole business, or we show that the whole bank can grow. I want to talk about three ways we show value, and through these three ways, it will also strengthen your API's team's position within the bank, so that bank lines of business are coming to you and asking, how can we use APIs to create new products and services, and how can we use APIs to open up our functionalities to more industry partners. So the first way we measure value is because we show how APIs help the business achieve their overall goals. And for this, you're going to need a few data sources. You're going to need your strategic plan, a network map. You need to understand your broader KPIs, and then you need liaison here. And you can see in that liaison, that's two people doing elbow bumps, because that's what we do nowadays. And then I'm just going to talk about one process tool that will get us there, which is causal processes, and then we'll do some reporting out of it. So let me walk you through this. So first of all, what you need to do is, in your API team, you need to go back to your bank business strategy and have a look at what the overall bank's business goals are for this reporting period. So that might be an annual, it might be a 3-year plan, or so on. So you've got to find out what the strategic plan is and what the business goals are. Then you need to do a network map. You need to know who in your organization is going to be responsible for those various goals. Then you need to understand what they need to report on. What are their KPIs for reporting on their business goals? And then you need to go and meet them and see about how you can help them to achieve that, and how your APIs might be helping them create those strategy outcomes. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to think through the causal process. So you sort of think through, okay, if there is this goal, how will APIs get there? And then you make a guesstimate. And we're going to measure those things, and over time we're going to improve those measurements. Let me give you one example. So here's one. I just picked a bank at random, so I just chose ANZ. I haven't worked with them individually myself. But here you can see in their strategic plan on the left-hand side, they've got a whole series of goals. So they've got things about the health and well-being, financial health and well-being of their customers is one. They've got one here that's about helping their customers to save and buy their own home, to grow their business, to learn and adapt. So you could choose one of those that might be relevant to your APIs. If you had a credit scoring or a crowdfunding type of API, maybe you might focus on the home loans, or one of the business loans, or something like that. The account information sort of thing, that could be about growing your business, so you could think about some of that sort of stuff. What I then looked at was their KPIs on the right-hand side. So I looked at some of their their half-yearly investor reporting that they do, and I noticed that currently they've got some goals where they're talking about there's reduction in ATM and branch volume because of COVID. So here there's been a dramatic fall off. So if you look on the strategy side, it's about improving the financial well-being of customers, and then something like deliver decent returns for our shareholders, targeted growth, low cost and capital efficient. So maybe it's about there, when you're looking at on the right-hand side, the dramatic fall in ATM and point of sale transactions, who is the person? So looking back at the network map, who is the person, or what is the team that's reporting on this to the investors? And then is there a way that you can work with them to show that the APIs are actually replacing some of that ATM and POS transactional volume by moving it into apps and services that FinTech are providing? So where people might have been doing POS transactions, now they're buying directly from e-commerce websites. And so your bank API is being used to perform that payment transaction on the e-commerce on the e-commerce website. And so you want to be able to work with them to be able to show that there is that transaction volume that's coming through, and that's bringing both in a processing fee and therefore revenue, but that it's also then showing that there's this replacement and there's this hardiness of the bank's systems. It's just that it's moved to a different sort of channel. So you might sort of say out of this, your process is, okay, yes, there is a reduction in ATM and POS transactions, but where we believe that there is an increase then in the payments transactions that are coming through via API. And then you want to be able to sort of measure what that sort of increase is that's maybe coming through. So you might be measuring the increasing number of API calls that are made to your payments APIs. And then you're wanting to be able to share that with the decision makers within the business to be able to show that your APIs are helping the business achieve its overall goals. So the next one we might want to look at is being able to know that any investment coming into our API team will be making a difference in both our revenue and in our business overall. And with that, I think it's really looking at what Adeel was talking about with this, the investment. It's the low investment, high return model that Adeel was talking about. And because there's a number of costs, as you know, in your API team that you've got. You've got to have the API management service that you're using. Now you're going to be measuring that your APIs are performant and are maintaining uptimes and speeds. You get a fair idea about who is using your APIs just because they've got to do a sign-up process where they tell you a little bit about themselves, and then once they've got apps that are built off your APIs, they may need to go through a registration process. So you've got some ideas about that, and then from the data though that also Adeel was showing you with the Earthport example, that there's a whole range of sort of automatic no code engagement with your APIs that you can create through using these sorts of tools that APIMatic offers, that you're able to, but you can also then measure what elements of those tools people are using, like which ones of the documentation are people actually stumbling on, whereabouts are they actually looking for more information around authentication or making those first calls and all of that sort of stuff. You can find out which SDKs are being most downloaded, so you get an idea there about the which programming languages are most important. So out of that, you get to use one of the process tools of being able to identify which parts of your developer documentation and which parts of those 4 DX stages that Adeel described are actually speeding up the developers' use of your APIs. And then once you know that, you can then double down on that investment. So you know that any additional money that the API team has for extending developer experience, from the data around how those developers are currently engaging with all of your developer documentation is making a difference. So where your best investment dollar is going to be to continue to drive that growth. So, and again, I think that builds up the internal political capital your API team has by being able to be strategic about what developer experience resources make a difference. And then finally, we know that happy developers generate more value. So they do that in a number of ways. One, that if they like your APIs, if they find your APIs easy to work with, then they're going to think of more products that they can build using your APIs. So that's one way. The other way is what we call Net Promoter Score, which is like, yes, you can measure that in a survey. How likely are you to recommend these APIs to another developer? But what we really see, where platforms make a difference, is you can measure Net Promoter Score by looking at the actual developer behavior. So do they actually recommend your APIs to another developer? Do they actually share in Stack Overflow or some other sort of coding answer forum? Do they actually mention your APIs or help share results? If someone's got an issue with using your bank API and they post a question in Stack Overflow, does another developer who is currently using your bank APIs, are they the ones to respond first to the Stack Overflow question? Are they posting on social media? Are they engaged in your Slack group or your other forum for your developer users to talk about, how to make the most of your APIs? So you can sort of generate this sort of network effect when developers have that ease of onboarding in the first place. And so here your data sources might be looking at that sort of forum engagement and how much your developers are actually ending up being ambassadors for your APIs. It may be about email feedback being available on your documentation or by follow-up occasionally. It may be holding surveys. But then the big one is actually counting the number of apps that are built from your bank APIs, and also perhaps how fast they're being built. Like from that time to first hello world to actually registering an app that's ready for commercial production use. And here your process tools is your product manager time to be able to reach out. You can actually automate some of these processes as you go. My experience with working with banks is the first run of developers that are building products. It's a small handful. It might be 5, it might be 20 different developer shops. So I mean, you might get a larger number of of developers signing up to use your APIs, but it tends to, it'll be like the 5 to 10 to 20 developers who are actually actively building at first with your API. So it's a number that's that you can sort of manually reach out to at first, and then as it scales, then you've already figured out some of these feedback mechanisms, so you can keep finding out whether or not your developers are happy and can quickly generate value with your APIs. So through those three ways, then you're able to then start not only investing in the developer experience, as Adeel has shown us, but then you're also able to start demonstrating that this is actually a business value generation suite of tools that you've now got within your bank. They're the slides I've got for talking about how to create the revenue, how to measure the revenue, and how to measure the value that's being generated from your APIs. Adeel's talked about the developer experience and how to move faster towards reducing the steps and reducing the time from first developer engagement to time to first hello world. So now's the perfect time for us to open up, isn't it, Adeel, and then talk together with our webinar guests to see how what their questions are about banking APIs and involving fintech into their platforms.
Yeah, great presentation, Mark. Love the way you understand things, and to be honest, like the most interesting part, like I was not much into fintech APIs until I read your reports. So I recommend every viewer over here to go and check the API and fintech APIs trend reports. There's a huge amount of information there, and if you know the trend, then you're able to take better decisions on with your APIs. So thank you very much, Mark. We are here for any questions, and let's answer those questions now.